Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode. Today we are going to be covering the following topics. All the timestamps are in the description below. And I hope you enjoy today's episode. So let's get started on these topics. So let's continue looking at relationships with Entity Framework. So as you know, our database over here is based on students having enrollments onto courses. So one student could be enrolled into multiple courses and one course could have multiple students enrolled into it. So we understand the relationship. Our table is very simple. As you saw previously, we just have student ID, name, we've got the enrollment ID, student ID, and the course ID that the student is enrolled onto. So here you can see that within our student class, we have the student ID, student name, and then we have this collection. And this is where a lot of people become stuck and they go, why do we actually need this collection? So with an Entity Framework, we know in the database the relationship between enrollments because one student could be enrolled onto multiple courses. So we have the enrollment class here, which has enrollment ID, student ID who is enrolled, and the course ID they're enrolled onto. So here, this line throws a lot of people off. So first of all, they get thrown off by why is it I collection? Think of it like you are working in a bakery and you need a basket to put your cakes in. So in this instance, the cakes would be the enrollments that the student is in. And that basket needs to have a few things in it. Your basket needs to be able to open up, allow you to add a cake, remove a cake, see how many cakes are inside your basket. So that basket cannot be just any basket. It has to meet a certain condition. And this is where the interface comes in. So here, what we're saying is we don't care, a customer could walk in and give us a basket to put their cakes in. We don't care what type of basket it is, whether it's made out of wicker, made out of wood, made out of paper, as long as it allows us to put cakes in, pick them out, and see how many cakes are in the basket. So we don't really care about what it is. So this is where it comes to Entity Framework. You are saying, you know what, I am going to have a basket here, collection, okay? And that collection is going to hold some cakes, in this instance, enrollments. And that's all that you need to tell Entity Framework. And behind the scenes, Entity Framework, we don't care how it does it, but it has some things going on that we do not care. You don't really need to understand your car engine, for example, how it works, how the fuel flows from the tank over to the engine. You don't need to know that. That's the same concept here. You don't need to know all the underlying things and how it works. You just need to know that you have a steering wheel or you have a basket, you have a car seat to sit on. That's all you care about. You have 4 seats in there. You never put 4 passengers. So it's the same concept. So here we've got this basket and this is going to hold the enrollment. So this kind of makes sense now in terms of our database because one student can be enrolled into many courses, so multiple enrollments. So I hope this clarifies why we use I collection here. This I collection could be anything. It could be a list. It could be something that you made a custom class, whatever it is. It needs to follow a certain rule, which is it must allow you to put something in it, take something out, see how many items are in your basket. So that's why this is known as an I collection because it's an interface. Just think of it as like a contract, a rule, a set of rules that need to be followed. So when you, for example, have a customer, they bring in a safe, a lock, and say to you, put cakes in, and you go, well, that's not what we agreed. We said we'd have a basket that let me put cakes in. You have basically got a safe lock that I cannot even open. So that doesn't meet the contract or the rule of what we agreed would be a basket. So previously, I explained how we have this data structure. So we've got a table called students and we've got the courses, and those students are enrolled into courses. So it's a very simple structure. And then we talked about why we have the classes set up here. So for example, student class has student ID and name, and then we've got the collection here to store the student's enrollment. So think of it like a basket where you store how many courses the student enrolled into. That allows you to add, delete any courses the student is enrolled into. But then this setup gives you a very good advantage, which is you can then use a link to query that data. So here you can see that I am going to retrieve a student called John. And here I am using the link where query method. We're going to compare the name of the student against John over here. As soon as we have that, then we have these two weird looking include statements. So then include for courses and include for enrollment. So what do they actually do? So you can see in our class, we have enrollments, which is a type of list you can think of. So it's a collection of enrollments. So what we are doing is for the same student, once we found him, we want to include all the enrollment that the student is on. Then we want to include the actual course name that the student is on. So what this allows you to do is then print out the name of the student, and for each enrollment, so here we are looping through using for each enrollment, we want to go through through and print out the course title. So you can see what is happening here. We loop through, so we got our student, we then loop through the enrollments, and then we print out the course title. And you can see how this is structured. So each enrollment can have a course and that title of that course. This all works because how we set up the structure for enrollment. So you can see enrollment can have a student and a course. So that is why entity framework will not take hard work for you behind the scene. That's why it's used quite a lot, because of ease of use with C# applications. So what could have been a very complex task has become a very simple task, where we can just, with a few lines of code, are able to go deep down into a relationship within the database and pull out relevant records. So if I run this code over here, you can see that we've got enrollment here for John, and he enrolled into English literature and computer science. This all have been done with a simple link query here. And we've used these two functions here to include the enrollment details and the course details. We're using bring back the first record. So if they have multiple Johns, then just bring back the first one. And then we just simply loop through that student. So that student information is stored in this variable. We just loop through it and show the output using console.writeLine. So your next question might be, why is it that when we are querying using the link here, why is it that we have to include these two methods? What's so special about them? So the way entity framework works is it works on a concept called lazy loading. So anything that it does not need to load, it won't load. And to demonstrate this, so we know our database looks like this. We have students. Students have ID and name, and we have a course. Course has an ID and a title. And then we have that the student can be enrolled into one or more of these courses. So we have enrollment ID, so student ID who is enrolled, and the course they are enrolled onto. So it's a very simple setup. So with entity framework, you have the situation where you want to pull the record for a student called John. And if you don't include these two methods, then it won't pull through the related data. So the related data is, well, actually, we want to know which courses is John enrolled into. And we then get the IDs, but we want to know the course detail. So we want to know the course's title. So you then include this. So let's demonstrate this to what this actually gives us. So if I run this code, and you can see I've got a bit of code here to do a write line over here. And you can see I'm outputting the course title, the student name, and so on. So here, this is the output that we get. Enrollments for John include English literature and computer science. So you can see this is pretty much what we expect our application to do. So if you don't include these two methods over here, then what will happen is you will get an error. So you can see the C# code is still valid. It seems to work, but when you have your loop over here, then you're going to come across problems. So at the minute you can see there are no errors. You would say, yeah, that code would work. If I run this here, you can see that we've got an unhandled exception. So we get enrollments for John, which is that line. But as soon as it tries to print the individual enrollments, it goes, well, those are null because the object is not set. So there is nothing to show for enrollments. This is because the entity framework only loads the data that it needs. So entity framework doesn't load that, and by default it will not load it unless you enable a few settings, and it's a bit more involved. But this process here, what it does is it eagerly loads the related data. So here, by just enabling these two methods here, we're saying once you found John, include his enrollments and then also include the course details. So entity framework will go and fetch the data from your database of the enrollments and the course. So that's why, when you have these two methods here, you get the correct output that you need, versus not including them, which you know that this line of code works, but as soon as you tried print enrollment, it goes, I didn't load the enrollment details. And by default, entity framework will not load any sub-relationship details. You have to use the include methods over here.